Now, wasn't that power packed? Well, it was indeed. And just for your information, we've been watched by over 15,000 people, and it is such a huge hit that so many people were looking forward towards this event. Now, we've got the final panel discussion coming up, and it is navigating pandemic through legal technology solutions. And we've got a very esteemed panel. We have Mr. Anand Prasad, founder, AP and Partners Advocates, Garima Mitra, Tree Life Consultancy, Advocate Prashant Mali, President, Cyber Law Consulting, Dr. Pawan Duggal, Advocate, Supreme Court of India, founder and owner, Pawan Duggal Associates, and Head Artificial Intelligence Law Hub. And the session chair is Ms. Shrirupa Chaudhary, Legal Tech Evangelist. Let's give them all a big round of applause. Come on, everybody.
Thank you for the warm introduction, and I am so privileged to be moderating this session with all of you. And being in the legal tech sector for the last 7 years, of course, I'm very passionate about this topic as well. And the panelists here have already been introduced briefly, but I've had the opportunity to chat with each of you and kind of understand your interests. And it's amazing to see that there is so much of interest in legal technology among the legal industry. So without further ado, I would start with introducing again Ms. Garima Mitra, who heads legal and compliance at Tree Life Consultancy. She works with startups on legal compliance and accounting. Mr. Anand Prasad is, of course, founder of one of India's biggest law firms, TriLegal, and now the founder of AP and Partners. And Dr. Prashant Mali is president of Cyber Law Consulting. He's also a prolific cyber law expert. And we have Dr. Pawan Duggal, who is also into cybersecurity, cyber law, and one of the most renowned experts in that field globally. So to start with, Ms. Mitra, I would like to ask you, um, what would you say was the way in which the COVID pandemic kind of affected the management of your firm? Will you say that it changed the way you manage work at your firm?
Thank you, Shrirupa, and good evening to the esteemed panel. I think it's an honor to be here discussing this with all the stalwarts in the industry. So to answer your question, Shrirupa, I think definitely COVID made us realize a lot of things and changed perceptions for most of us, right? And it just happened very quickly, right? So the transition also had to happen very, very quickly. So the way we managed the team changed drastically. So as a consulting firm and as people who are used to managing teams that are sitting right in front of us and just walking out the door and getting work done, right? From there to helping everyone maneuver around the entire new management system was a complete challenge. And I think that's where technology helped a lot. So putting in certain technology solutions rather helped a lot in terms of getting that management right, I think, in the pandemic. And I think the only problem was that it was very sudden. So there was no one was allowed that transition period. It was just today and tomorrow it had to change. So
did you do anything specific for data migration or any kind of did anything that you did pre-COVID help you in this transition?
So thankfully for us, we're a boutique consulting firm. So most of it was the solutions that were implemented right in the beginning were carried out in terms of remote working as it is. So we were not a remote working office, but of course we manage our Bombay and Delhi offices from the Bangalore and Delhi offices from Bombay. So either ways, those two offices were working remotely for us to manage. So we already had systems in place, like having sheets in terms of using softwares like Trello or Slack for communication, so internal communication. So all of this was already put in the organization, and our data was always on the cloud. So for us, migration was very seamless. The only difference was the mindset shift from sitting in the office space to sitting at home. So thankfully for us, because everything was already in place, the technology was already in place, it didn't really require that bigger shift. And I think the cloud server having data there was just a good addition to that. So we didn't have to actually migrate the entire data anywhere as such.
All right, great. So moving on to Mr. Prasad, you have been working in litigation, complex litigations, merging corporate and litigation expertise. But during the COVID, we saw courts closing, except a few courts which were open, and there were virtual hearings in those courts. But would you say that we have completely embraced technology in litigation? And what is the way forward in COVID times where physical distancing is needed? And how do we kind of manage that in litigation?
Thanks, Shrirupa. Pleasure to be on the panel with all you guys. Pawan, I've known for a while, so hi, Pawan. But just sort of responding to your question there, and it sort of takes you to where were we as a state in delivering justice. And I think we had lots of problems with our legal system before COVID hit us. The governments are working, lawyers are working, courts are working at different solutions, and that's true around the world. Deployment of technology was one of the key aspects of how governments around the world, the states around the world, look to deal with the legal situation. My sense, and I won't get into the various problems of the legal situation, but I think that the COVID triggered sort of problems with how our courts are functioning, allows us or opens the door, creates an opportunity to actually jump up a few steps along how justice is delivered. So at the moment, we have primarily the Supreme Court, but some other courts as well, holding court through video conferencing. And it's done in a very rudimentary, very basic level. I mean, like all of us jumped on to Zoom calls and we learned new technologies overnight. Within a week, all of us were experts at using the kind of stuff that we are today, which was not true, not necessarily true for all of us pre the lockdown period. But and you see the same kind of thing happening in courts. Courts are doing urgent matters or doing interim remedies through these hearings, but actually not doing detailed hearings. Not too many, at least. There might be a few. I mean, you might have one or Prashant Bhushan contempt case that drags on for a while, but that's where courts spend their time. My sense is that there is real opportunity to transform this from just dealing with urgent hearings to making it more long drawn, dealing with entire cases through video platforms. Now, of course, it makes people uncomfortable because none of us are used to it. None of us are used to the technology. We sometimes feel it's not as effective. But then it helps us getting onto technological platforms helps us deal with a bunch of backlog and delays in judicial processes and a bunch of other things that were wrong with our legal system. So here we are presented with an opportunity to make that change. And I would think of it more in terms of, I'm not one of those super optimistic guys who thinks that the pandemic is here for another 3 months. In my worldview, the pandemic is here for a minimum of 2 years to 5 years. And unless we decide that we want to put our judicial justice delivery system on hold, except for urgent situations, there will be a need to move because this will impact both litigants, people who come to court, and it will kill a whole host of lawyers, a whole host of professionals that are dependent on the justice delivery system for a livelihood. So I don't think it's a real option to keep saying 6 months and then roll it over to the next 6 months and then roll it over to the next 6 months. this is now an opportunity for governments to invest, state and central government to invest in the sort of the architecture that comes around. In today's world, we function with screens like this, and you could hold virtual courtrooms. But as you start using this at greater levels, they could be used. There's room to actually up the technology levels. So you could be in holographic courtrooms, three-dimensional courtrooms, where you sort of approximate the experience of a real court. But I don't think we can afford to put justice delivery system on hold. So in my mind, there is this need, there is this opportunity, and I think there is a real need to actually transition from just doing urgent hearings and things like that to actually going to regular courtrooms through such a process.
Thank you, Mr. Prasad. Dr. Mali, what would be your opinion on e-courts that we were just discussing? You're on mute, Dr. You need to unmute yourself.
Sorry for that. E-courts, I feel, as what the other panelist view is also, like we need to continue with e-courts parallelly when the physical courts also run. At least some part of courts need to run in parallel, because it's e-courts is a better way of coming up in ADR and specifically called the ODR, or online dispute resolution. And with this too many of e-commerce companies and a lot of IT coming up, if this e-courts, but that, as he rightly said, as Anand rightly said, is we need to have infrastructure in place. Ultimately, if we don't have infrastructure in place and proper training to lawyers should be given, and if that is not done, then it's like chaos. Like right now, it's completely chaos. What is happening in e-courts? There has to be a topic, either a bridge course. When it all started, that was my advice. Either a bridge course for existing lawyers and one subject on e-courts to the lawyers who are getting upgrade, like LLB students or LLM students. Like you need to have a topic there, how to handle this technology. Because this can be done right from your mobile phone, so you need not have your laptops also. So how to catch up with this is very important. So those heads-up training was required, which really didn't happen. It was just one or couple of webinars which happened. So that didn't bring people to the level. So if that happens, if Honorable Supreme Court takes it, or the E-Committee takes up this matter and just it percolates down to the last level, I think then e-courts will be a greater success. But physical courts has to be there, because there's a whole lot of generation which cannot function only on e-courts.
Thank you, Dr. Mali. Would you say that we can build trust amongst litigants in e-courts?
See, people who understand technology, yes, you can build some trust. But people who don't understand technology, they will only have a view that kya ho raha hai, samajh mein nahi aa raha hai, kind of stuff. Because people are, I sometimes feel litigants get some zing out of coming to courts and sitting in the courts for hours together. And they feel that it's a part of their justice delivery mechanism, coming to courts and feeling the courts, and they feel more confident about it instead of going to e-courts. But the newer version of consumers or the e-commerce people or the AI-enabled generation will be more happier on e-courts.
Very interesting, Dr. Mali. Do we have Dr. Duggal on the panel? Okay, I think he's facing some connectivity issues. So we'll wait for him to rejoin the panel. So Mr. Prasad, taking from that point, what do you think is the way forward for small claims which are now, nobody can file them anymore because the courts have closed? Do we have a recourse in technology so that litigants can actually resolve their disputes? Because, justice delayed is justice denied. So what is the way forward that we can hope in such times?
See, around the world, there's been this sense that the entire justice delivery system is slowing down. I mean, there's a limitation to the kind of courts that you could have. and populations are growing, and with growing populations, business is growing. It's many times more. So the nature of disputes, the number of disputes have gone up, which is why the initial reaction was, let's try alternate dispute resolution, let's try arbitration, etc. Let's try tribunalization. So all those are done and dusted. I don't think those are offering good enough remedy. Now, what's happening around the world? We say that we use artificial intelligence, but I've sort of the early days when I heard talk of use of algorithms and artificial intelligence in justice delivery was about 7-8 years back, and a lot of that talk was happening in the UK. But since then, it sort of spread around in different parts of the world. Lots of law firms have absorbed those kinds of technologies. So you will have, I mean, more recently, there's been in some of the Chinese states, they've actually set up, I know China is a bad word, but in some of the Chinese states, they actually have set up for small, tiny disputes, Sale of Goods Act, intellectual property disputes. So things that where the levels of pleading are not very complicated. They have set up technology platforms, whether on phones or on screens of some kind, things which result in justice delivery from the data they cited, 38 days from start to finish of the trial. Now, they are these simple disputes which we tend to linger on for 4-5 years in trial courts that are very painful for a lot of us. I mean, typical consumer issues that we encounter. Many of them not very complicated. You could get them done fairly quickly through these platforms. There are other European countries that are trying this. The UK has been trying artificial intelligence or AI courts or virtual courts. So there are no humans there. It's just an algorithm that works the justice system with a fair degree of success with their motor vehicle dispute situation. So different countries are trying it. Again, because we are where we are and we have this huge backlog in terms of delays and angst that come with delays. There is this opportunity to just leapfrog, make a few significant fundamental changes, speed up the justice delivery system.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Prasad. And I completely agree with you that one of the ways to kind of reduce the pendency of cases, as both of you mentioned, is to look at technology solutions in litigation where people can access courts much better and much faster. We have Dr. Duggal back with us. So welcome, sir. And my question to you, because of your prolific experience in cybersecurity, is are you seeing any major changes in the post-COVID world in terms of cybersecurity in the legal industry?
Thanks. I believe we are going through transformational times. COVID-19 is a great catalyst for further change, and cybersecurity is going to be one area where we are likely to see a maximum amount of activity. Already, we had seen in the time prior to COVID-19 that cybersecurity breaches were continuing, including breaches targeted at the legal fraternity. However, COVID-19 has brought in an atmosphere of fear and panic. And these cybersecurity breachers are ammonizing and weaponizing this fear and panic to target all kinds of stakeholders at will. No wonder after COVID-19, the amount of cyber security breaches that have happened have phenomenally risen. Well, it all starts with the Brunel University hospital attack on the second week of March 2020, and then goes on to engulf not just the US Department of Health and Human Services, but almost a variety of critical information infrastructure across the world. I'm of the firm opinion that these cybersecurity breaches will continue to keep on happening. In my latest book, New Cyber World Order Post-COVID-19, I've argued how these increasing cybersecurity breaches are going to lead to a new world order in cyberspace as we come to the close of the fight against COVID-19 first wave of infections. Now, these cybersecurity breaches are being attacked and are being targeted at networks, individuals, governmental resources, and critical information infrastructure. The recent big attacks in Australia have actually compelled Australia to refer to these attacks as a breach of their cyber sovereignty. In India, the Indian Nodal Agency on Cyber Security, being the Indian Computer Emergency Response Team, of a big imminent cyber attack based on phishing. And I think while the big attack will happen on critical information infrastructure, there's no denying the fact that the legal fraternity and the legal tech industry will be potentially a big target for these cybersecurity breaches. So if a big California law firm, which represents all kinds of celebrities, can get hacked during COVID-19, and all the data of these celebrities, including Lady Gaga, being made available after the said hack, both on the superficial net and on the dark net, I see no reason why this kind of a trend ought not to be replicated in the Indian context. Of course, in Indian context, reporting is a big issue, though the Indian government has come up with a cyber security breach notification which mandates all corporates to report cyber security breaches. The fact remains is that this is a notification that's observed more in breach rather than in compliance. But having said that, I expect more and more law firms, legal fraternity, and the legal tech industry to be potentially a target of these kinds of cybersecurity breaches. They could either take the manifestation of a distributed denial of service attack, or could potentially even manifest itself in the form of a big ransomware attack. Already, every 11 seconds, one company anywhere in the world becomes a victim of this kind of ransomware attacks. So in a scenario like this, I'm pretty clear that cybersecurity will have to be increasingly a big component of the decision-making and implementation of effective actions for the legal tech industry, for the legal industry as a whole, primarily because the legal industry in India needs to wake up to one new ground reality, which was already in for some time, but COVID-19 has put heightened focus on the same. The fact remains is that all legal fraternity, whether it's law firms, whether it's legal companies, or whether it's legal tech companies, when they're providing information or advice to their clients on computer systems, computer networks, computer resources, communication devices, as also data and information in the electronic form, they're governed under the Indian Information Technology Act 2000. They become intermediaries, and in order for them to be taking the benefit of exemption from legal liability, all these legal industry stakeholders will have to increasingly start exercising due diligence under the IT Act, and of course have various compliances. You don't do these compliances and you expose yourself to humongous volumes of legal consequences, including being sued for unlimited damages by way of compensation under Section 43 capital A of the IT Act under certain circumstances. Clearly, I see a huge wave of litigation coming in, just as we come to the close of the fight against first wave of infections in COVID-19. I expect the legal fraternity to be ready for this new wave, but I also want to give a forewarning that we should ourselves not become engulfed or sucked into a whirlpool of litigation, because in the coming times, almost anybody and everybody is going to be suing somebody or the other. So in a scenario like this, it will be very essential that we have to up our antennas, have to specifically focus on protection and preservation of cybersecurity, and we have to come up with the new holistic approaches on how to deal with constantly changing ground realities in cyberspace. There's no denying the fact that cyberspace is no longer going to be the same. Life has changed irreversibly. Let's start accepting this as a ground reality. The work from home has added far more new contours of exposure to the legal fraternity, with people working from home not concentrating enough on cybersecurity. At a time when India does not have either a data protection law or a dedicated law on cybersecurity or a law on privacy, I think we are at a very, very interesting mix of time in history. There's going to be a huge concoction of potential consequences that could be arriving before and facing the legal industry in general and the legal tech industry in particular. But I also see this as a massive moment of opportunity for the legal tech industry, that they can start coming up with these new services and new products that focusing on cybersecurity, which can specifically for the legal sector at large.
Okay, I think we lost Dr. Duggal there, but he, I think, made a very, very clear point about the need for cybersecurity, especially in a work from home situation where you don't have the security protocols that would normally be present, perhaps in an office environment, especially, and also in COVID times, the over reliance on online tools for communication could be one of the reasons for such cybersecurity breaches. Dr. Mali, you also have been working in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. Specifically to do with artificial intelligence, would you say there is a difference in the pre-COVID and the post-COVID world?
See, because there was a lot of time, huge time for research during this COVID times, and I feel artificial intelligence by the way of growth and artificial intelligence post COVID would play a larger role because there is a lot of maturity in it, and going ahead, lawyers as well as general counsels will have to up their knowledge on artificial intelligence, because when CEOs and top management or the CXOs are going to use artificial intelligence, they will definitely want their CXOs in the legal arena, the legal counsel or head legals to be using artificial intelligence or come up to using the technology which the organization is implementing. So artificial intelligence is here to stay in legal fraternity, both in the corporate world as well as in the law firms. In both cases, it may be implemented differently because in practical lawyers, as we may use it to forecast certain things. But that also needs a lot of test cases, and in India, we don't have too much amount of test cases been faded into this artificial intelligence or machine learning or the deep learning databases, specifically when it comes to the practice orientation. But yes, definitely in the corporate world, a lot of things have been faded and a lot of implementation is there, and they have found a lot of cost savings there. So it is there to stay in corporate world more initially than the practical world.
Thank you, Dr. Mali. So I think we have a use case for both cybersecurity and artificial intelligence adoption in the legal industry. And we've seen the increased adoption in post-COVID times, and I would think that it is here to stay. Mr. Prasad, you've worked with various international law firms during your career, such as Allen and Overy and others. What would you say are the best practices that these firms follow in relation to technology that can be adopted in Indian law firms or Indian legal industry as a whole?
So what are the practices? A very detailed conversation, but I can tell you the outcomes that those sorts of the usage of technology generates. So essentially, when we look at lawyers, we come to individual expertise. And what these guys have been able to do in terms of deployment of technology and creation of templates and know-how systems is that they make average lawyers look good. They look better than they are really. So when that's how they sort of deploy technology in various ways. So whether it is precedent systems, know-how systems, training systems, they're very average law graduates that look like little more like geniuses than they truly should deservedly be. But that's the end use that I see, and as a result, their ability to look at a client, to face a client, to absorb greater levels of work, to generate greater revenue, and at the end of the day, to create greater levels of client satisfaction. So when I see Indian firms are trying to get there, just about started using technology, but when I look at Indian law firms, and I'm not talking about the sort of the extreme top level that you get in the Western world, but the fairly large, the big names. So if you say in the UK context, the Magic Circle firms, I would say that on an average, the Indian law firms quality of individual lawyer is significantly superior to that you would get in the Western world. But when a client encounters those, the guys that are inferior look much better than us because they actually deploy technology to look better, and that is a great learning to take. It doesn't happen so easily. They have to put in 5 to 10 years to get the technology to that level. So these guys have been doing it for a while, which is what makes them look the way they are just now. But that's clearly something that we will need to absorb, depending on how our market ultimately moves, whether we open up, we remain a global market. All of that will be dependent.
Thank you, Mr. Prasad. So I think you're saying that legal technology will make us look better than the foreign lawyers, which is a great takeaway, I think, from that piece. Ms. Mitra, coming back to you, what are the, since your firm works in legal compliance and accounting, what are the legal tech tools that are present in these sectors that were there pre-COVID, and are we seeing more adoption in the post-COVID world of these tools?
So definitely, Shrirupa, we are seeing a lot of adoption of these tools. As Anand also rightly pointed out, that Indian firms have started giving some importance to automation, and I think the crux of it lies, and the crux of deploying technology in any law firm or consulting firm is that you need to have process driven things rather than people driven things, which just makes output easier, which also makes the deliverables qualitative, right? And like Anand said, that they just make people appear superior than what they are. And I think that mindset is now starting to set in, and which is why that deployment is increasing as we pass. So if you go to see, there are a lot of technology solutions, like in terms of accounting, you have ZoBooks, you have QuickBooks. Then in terms of contract management, you have a lot of contract management softwares which are catering to the MNCs. But now you have a lot of startups that have sprung up, like say SpotDraft or ProVakil, that are helping with litigation management, contract management. And again, with compliance, also there are a lot of again solutions that help you to create those templatized versions, to help you create a repository of templates, which I think becomes easier, and it just helps to have something that is process driven. So it gives you that beginning of a process. Of course, when you go to see, it just makes life easier for the professional working, because it just takes away the redundancy of the work that you are doing. I mean, I may spend around 15 minutes looking for the correct template, whereas from a software, I just have to type in certain keywords and I'm going to get the template. So that's like 15 minutes or 20 minutes of my time just saved automatically. Of course, I think a problem that as Indians face in imbibing technology is that it comes at an expense. So it's a costly affair. And to build good technology or to deploy good technology in your internal processes is a costly affair, which I think should be looked at as a capital expenditure in order to get to that place where we have better outputs from the professionals, basically. And it's just redundant work that can be done by an AI that, we might as well not do it.
Right. And would you say that these legal tech solutions are here to stay? Because we've seen a spike in usage now. Would you say that in the post-COVID world, we will still see them being relevant?
Absolutely, I think we will, and these technology solutions are here to stay, because once you start using them, you get so used to that level of comfort that you have, and that mind space that is freed because of that technology, that you don't want to let it go. So I mean, for example, we use QuickBooks for our internal billing mechanisms, and it just generates bills seamlessly, and there is auto reminder and everything in there, and it helps us to file GST. It helps you to do your taxes. It gets linked to your bank account, and that entire process just becomes seamless. So that's one major part of my administrative function already taken care of. So again, it just makes life so simple that you don't want to go back to the rudimentary way. It's as simple as that. If you make something better, you don't want to go back.
Right. Okay, so I think we have to wrap up the session now, and final closing thoughts from everybody on the future of technology in the legal industry during and post COVID. Do you think technology will make a difference? We have been known to be slow adopters to technology, traditionally, one of the industries that has been criticized that way, but we've seen a massive increase in adoption in COVID times. What is your take on the future going forward? Starting with Dr. Dubey.
Well, I think COVID-19 teaches us some key learnings. Number one, we have to increasingly start incorporating cybersecurity as part of our day-to-day operations as law firms, as legal tech companies. Number two, don't wait for the law. The law may take a bit longer, but having said that, do everything proactive in your power and possession to protect your data and to protect your networks, because given this work from home scenarios, we could potentially be seeing some unwarranted litigation and legal exposures. And finally, I think ensure compliance with applicable law, whether it's the Information Technology Act 2000 or whether it's your statutory responsibilities of due diligence as intermediaries. Let's wait for this new Personal Data Protection Bill when it comes across. Let's wait for these new amendments to the IT Act. But let's take existing legal frameworks as the basis for securing us and our legal interests as we go forward. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dubey. Dr. Mali, your closing thoughts?
More awareness is needed. Like in the legal firm, we use technology as aid to our working, but rarely we think about the security and the data breach issues, or something may be getting hacked or data may be getting leaked. So if that awareness is imbibed more in the legal fraternity who's using legal technology, I think they will trade with caution, and the caution will actually help the clients because their data is at stake. We are just the custodians of the data which we have because of our clients. So more awareness, and cybersecurity has to become way of life, and it has to come in our culture of law firm. So once it is there, then we can use our mobile phones and all the IT gadgets with their due care. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mali. Mr. Prasad?
So, I mean, I'll state the obvious, there's no getting away from technology, but one of the things that I noticed, particularly the pandemic, we have had no regular justice for the last 6 months. The only guys I see protesting about this are lawyers because their livelihoods are impacted. But none of the litigants are actually protesting, which to my mind brings the question is, why are litigants not protesting? And probably because they don't notice the difference. They probably do not notice the difference, and courts are functioning in full-blown way, which then speaks to the speed at which justice is delivered. This results in a loss of confidence, and you will see, unless we can speed up justice delivery, and technology is one way to make that happen. Otherwise, we'll have to move to recruitment at a completely different level. But with pandemic-like situations, it's going to be very difficult with physical courts. I mean, you need to have disasters happen in 1 or 2 courts, and the rest of them in the country will shut down. The virus is very contagious. There is no way that we should allow the state of justice delivery to remain where it is. This is a great time to use technology to because people are now across the board. Lawyers who would be the first to resist technology will now grab it with both hands because it will give them livelihood. So this is a tremendous opportunity. And I suspect if we don't do it in the next few years, you will have people, more and more people protesting on the streets. People will pull out handguns and weapons and bring about their own justice systems.
Okay, that's a very grave prophecy unless we adopt technology in the legal industry. I hope the stakeholders are listening. Ms. Mitra, your closing thoughts?
So I think what we need to take away from this is that what COVID-19 has taught all of us is that the world is a very small place now because of technology. While I completely agree with the thoughts of Dr. Prashant and Dr. Pawan that it's very important to have cybersecurity at the fore of your technology advancements, because working with startups and working with emerging companies, it's a blind spot for them. No one really actually even is thinking about that threat, which is very, very imminent, because, and more so ever, because all of these companies are tech companies, most of them, and they have immense amount of data. So cybersecurity needs to the awareness needs to come, of course, from the councils that do advise these guys, and that's the starting of it. But the biggest takeaway I think that I've also had in COVID-19 is that it's a shift in your attitude towards technology. Till the time all of us as lawyers have been, walking out of the door, associates coming in and looking for advice, all of that has stopped. So a new managerial etiquette has been put in place in order to manage the organization. And I think lastly, it has also, while I agree with Anand that litigating lawyers are facing the brunt of lack of technology in the courts, but there are certain corporate lawyers who have also gained from this pandemic, because it has just brought in a lot of comfort in terms of clients who are probably pan-India, right? So, for example, if there were a client in Delhi and he or she wanted to employ someone for their legal advice, they would still be comfortable for someone who's in Delhi because they would want to meet that person and things like that. But now, in the current situation, that is no longer the case. So, that just becomes one less hurdle for upcoming lawyers. So it just makes things easier. So probably someone in Bombay can hire someone in Delhi, and vice versa, right? And I think that has also it has, in a segment of the legal fraternity, possibly created an opportunity also. And that, I think, gives a lot of impetus to the legal platforms that are connecting these lawyers and customers. So, which we again goes to see where legal tech is here to stay,
Right. Thank you so much. That was a really engaging panel. We discussed everything from litigation woes and how technology can mitigate that, to cybersecurity issues faced by the legal industry now with the COVID pandemic, which is also here to stay. We discussed artificial intelligence in the legal industry. We discussed specific legal tech tools and also opportunities created for the legal industry in such times. We can only hope that technology is embraced by the legal industry like all other industries, and that we can truly move forward in today's times using technology. Thank you so much for a really enriching panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, a very, very exciting conversation, and indeed, technology is the way forward. And thank you, Srirupa, for moderating it very beautifully. And ladies and gentlemen, what a day it's been. We all across the country, we've had more than 15,000 people viewing all the action which happened throughout the day. It's been an action-packed day. And here is final words and the word of thanks by Garima Ahuja. Let's give her a round of applause.